To deploy a process, we need to create a Process Deployment Descriptor, or PDD. I'll open up an existing PDD for the quote process so we can have a look at what's inside. Changing information in this top section will override the global engine settings that can be set in the ActiveVOS console. Logging and persistence can be set to be very granular or very coarse. Suspending on uncaught faults puts the process in a suspended state instead of a faulted state, allowing you to potentially fix the underlying problem from the console and then resume the process. With ActiveVOS, we have a lot of control over process versioning. If this process was already previously deployed, I could provide a new version number or let the system automatically increment the version for me. I can define when this new version should take effect, either immediately or on a specific date. And I can also define if this version should automatically expire on a certain date. I can also control how process instances that are currently executing should be handled when this new version is deployed. In-flight processes can be suspended, they can be migrated to use the new plan, or they can continue to use the original plan and only new process instances will use this new version. Now let's take a look at the Partner Links tab. This is basically where we can provide more information about how services will be invoked and also provide the binding information for the service endpoints. For instance, if we take a look at the estimation service, we can see that this is a standalone web service with a static endpoint that points to a URL on my local app server. With ActiveVOS, we can invoke all sorts of services like JMS, Java, REST, and a whole host of others. For web service calls like this one, I could have also defined the endpoint as dynamic, where, for instance, the process would decide which endpoint to contact on the fly, based on either message data or some other logic within the process. Clicking on the ellipsis button allows me to define policies to govern the services within my process. I can apply custom policies or choose from a number of standard policies like basic authentication, SAML, digital signatures, and more. The Index Properties tab lets me optionally create pointers to certain message elements that I might be interested in creating custom reports or to use as filters when looking at process instances from within the console. The Eventing tab is another optional tab. It's mostly used in conjunction with complex event processing. From here, I can tell the engine to create an event message when certain things happen. In this case, an event called "sent" will be issued when the send estimate activity has been completed. References lists artifacts that this process needs in order to execute properly. And the Source tab simply displays the XML source of the PDD. So, once my endpoints and policies are defined, I can save the PDD and then deploy it. To deploy, I'll just right-click on the project within the Project Explorer view and select Export. I'll export the project as a contribution, Business Process Archive file, or beeper as we call it. The beeper basically bundles up the process and resources into a single package that's deployed to the app server. Deployment to an app server occurs in two stages. In the first stage, the beeper file is created on the file system. In the second stage, if you select the deployment type of web service, the beeper will automatically be deployed to your app server. If you don't select this option, you can use the ActiveVOS console to manually deploy the beeper. Selecting this option creates an Ant script to make future deployments even easier. I'll click Finish to complete the deployment. We can see here that the deployment was successful. And we can also see that this is version number 4 of the process. As a final check, we can open the ActiveVOS console and check the resource catalog to have a look at all of the deployed processes. The Contributions page displays all of the projects that have been deployed. And when I select a contribution, I get the details of the processes and all of the artifacts that were packaged along with it. In ActiveVOS 8, each time I deploy a contribution, the associated WSDL, schema, forms, and other artifacts are automatically updated and incremented with a version number. This allows for much more precision when reverting to a previously deployed version. Whenever a process or one of its underlying artifacts is updated, the major part of the version number for the process is automatically incremented. If an underlying resource, like a form, hasn't changed since the previous deployment, only the minor part of the version for that resource will be incremented. If an underlying resource was in fact updated in this deployment, then the major part of the version number for that resource will also be changed. For instance, I can see here that in this deployment, the process versions have been updated to 4. Most of the resources have remained unchanged. I can see that the Xperia estimate form was last updated in version number 2, but it hasn't changed for this deployment. And I can also see that the final estimation human task form has in fact changed during this deployment. For more information on deployment, please refer to product documentation or download and deploy some of our sample applications from the ActiveVOS website. Thank you.